This is LBC News.
It's 5:40. I'm John Stratford. Here are your headlines. Donald Trump has accused Ukraine's President Zelensky of being a dictator without elections. He's hit back at criticism from President Zelensky that he lives in a bubble of disinformation. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has been to visit the Pope in hospital. The 88-year-old is being treated for pneumonia in both lungs. A major incident's been declared in Godstone in Surrey, where 2 sinkholes have opened up in a road, causing people to have to leave their homes. And Emma Raducanu has thanked fans for messages of support after a difficult experience at the Dubai Tennis Championships. She was tearful after spotting a man in the crowd who previously displayed fixated behaviour towards her.
This is LBC News.
So then, as we continue to talk about Ukraine, we have seen Donald Trump this afternoon levelling insults at President Zelensky of Ukraine, accusing him of being a dictator without elections, who'd better move fast, he says, or he won't have a country left. Let's turn to LBC News Washington correspondent Simon Marks. An extraordinary day, Simon.
Absolutely, John. The lowest point in the relationship between the United States and Ukraine for 30 years. A partnership that goes back 3 decades that Donald Trump is now shredding. It is absolutely apparent that that claim by Volodymyr Zelensky earlier in the day that the American president is living in a bubble of disinformation stuck in the American president's craw, which gave rise to this furious post on Truth Social, the social media platform that Donald Trump owns and through which he communicates with the public. But it is also apparent from this post that the critique that Donald Trump is living in a bubble of disinformation is actually proven, because this post includes a number of falsehoods and lies about what is taking place in Ukraine. He claims that Zelensky admits that half of the money the United States sent him is missing. That is a lie. It is not true. There is no money missing. What Zelensky has said is that some of the money approved by Congress for Ukraine did not actually reach Ukraine. Much of it was never intended to reach Ukraine. It was supposed to be spent here in the United States, but independent analyses of the finances show that no money is missing. He says that Volodymyr Zelensky refuses to have elections and is very low in Ukrainian polls. Yesterday he claimed that Zelensky had an approval rating of only 4%. That is not true. Zelensky's approval rating stands at 56% among Ukrainians, substantially higher than Donald Trump's approval rating among Americans. And then he goes on to describe Zelensky as a dictator without elections. He better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. I think some people reading that sentence will wonder if there isn't an implicit threat contained within it. He says the only thing that Zelensky has been good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died, which is an echo of President Trump saying yesterday that he believed that Ukraine had started the war. It was Zelensky's fault that the war had begun. So this is a complete 180-degree reversal now of the policy that was being pursued by the Biden administration. This is also a further evidence of the fact that Donald Trump's talking points on Ukraine mirror almost precisely the talking points of Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin, all of those people who have spent years insisting that Donald Trump has no pro-Russian sympathies, are finding that the rug is being pulled out from under them at great rapidity. And this argument that, Zelensky is a dictator without elections, well, yes, there have been no elections in Ukraine while the war has been taking place, but Donald Trump is a man who sits in an Oval Office alongside the bust of Winston Churchill that he brought back to the Oval Office almost exactly 1 month ago. And of course, Winston Churchill governed in Britain during the Second World War, delaying elections, leading a government of national unity, very much in the way that Zelensky has been governing throughout the Ukraine conflict. So there is much historical precedent for postponing elections. And honestly, you know, this idea that if Zelensky wants a seat at the peace table, he needs to hold a fresh election. Well, based on the poll numbers currently in Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky would be handily returned to power by Ukrainian voters who may well find themselves expressing greater admiration for him as the result of Volodymyr Zelensky coming under attack like this from President Donald Trump. All of this opens up all sorts of complexities for Republicans on Capitol Hill, who are, I think, in some measure, increasingly anxious about the nature of Donald Trump's approach to these peace talks. We have already heard from one Republican on Capitol Hill, Mike Lawler, a congressman from New York, who took to X today to say that Vladimir Putin is a vile dictator and thug who has worked in a concerted effort with China and Iran to undermine and destabilize the United States, Europe, Israel, and the free world. He is not our friend nor our ally. And Congressman Lawler, and again, he is a Republican from New York, goes on to say that any deal towards peace in Ukraine must include Ukraine at the negotiating table and must protect its structural sovereignty and that of its neighbors. So that's the view of one influential Republican in the House of Representatives, and there will be others, I suspect, from whom we hear in the coming hours and days. And you've got to wonder what the Prime Minister is making of all of this, because next week he is coming to Washington for face-to-face talks with President Trump at the White House. He will become the first European leader to cross the threshold during Donald Trump's second term in office for what I think, without question now, are going to be the most serious, delicate, even perilous bilateral talks between a British Prime Minister and an American President that this city or the world has witnessed since 1945, as the realization now spreads throughout Europe that Donald Trump may not only no longer be an ally of NATO members and European governments, but may very soon become a very clear adversary.
Simon Marks in Washington, thank you very much. We've been hearing from Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, on Donald Trump's comments in the last hour. She's insisted that President Zelensky is not a dictator. He is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine, she says, who bravely stood up to Putin's illegal invasion. And she says, under my leadership and under successive Conservative prime ministers, we have and always will stand with Ukraine. But she says President Trump is right that Europe needs to pull its weight, and that includes the UK. We need to get serious, she says, and the PM, she says, will have my support to increase defence spending.